You're listening to Beat Autoimmune and Thrive, the podcast all about reversing and preventing autoimmune conditions so you can live your most vibrant life as soon as possible. We talk about autoimmune root causes, actionable solutions, and inspirational healing stories. I'm Palmer Kippola, and I used to have MS. Today, I'm an author, a speaker, a functional medicine certified health coach, a pickleball player, and nature lover who's helped thousands of people reclaim their health and their best lives. Let's dive into this episode. I am super excited to welcome my friend and brilliant practitioner, affectionately known as your friendly lab nerd, Dr. Sam Shay. Dr. Sam holds 4 advanced degrees. He's a Doctor of Chiropractic, has postgraduate training in acupuncture and functional neurology, and is certified in functional medicine. He also trained for years under the renowned clinician, Dr. Kalish. Today, Dr. Sam helps busy health-conscious people solve their unique health puzzles using a personalized, data-driven approach which combines genetics and functional lab testing to help improve resilience, energy, and brain health. Now, Dr. Sam's passion for healing stems from his own long healing journey, which lasted between ages 6 and 18. When he battled fatigue and anxiety, chronic pain, insomnia, digestive issues, sugar addiction, video game addiction, and emotional dysregulation. That experience and 2 decades of clinical practice helped inspire him to develop powerful frameworks like the neuroharmony method, which is a trauma-informed nervous system first approach designed to help people move out of survival mode and into a state where true healing can happen. And I'm super excited about this because Dr. Sam has supported people around the world in reclaiming their health, their clarity, their well-being. And today he's here to share how this neuroharmony method can be a game changer for people struggling with autoimmune conditions. Now, I first met Sam in 2017, I think, at an Institute for Functional Medicine conference. And we quite literally met in a hotel hallway where he was headed to a private cocktail gathering hosted by JJ Virgin to introduce her Mindshare Health Influencer Business Summit. And I decided to tag along, and that one spontaneous hallway conversation led me to a life-changing community I never would have known about otherwise. And since then, Sam and I have stayed connected, supported each other's work, and continued to share ideas on how to best serve our clients on their own healing journeys and support each other. So, Sam, it's so wonderful to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you, Palmer. I can't believe it was almost 10 years ago, but here we are. And yeah, just my one small point of clarification in terms of just for the technical reasons. But the advanced degree, the functional neurology, I was a functional neurologist for 8 years. I even wrote board questions for about 5 of those years. But I gave up my functional neurology certification when I switched to full-time Zoom concierge functional medicine because it's hard to do neurology over Zoom. But I had a very formative run for 8 years in the functional neurology world, and it's certainly the neuroharmony model. Neuro is right there in the title. And I'm very grateful for everything I did in the functional neurology world and learned and was able to support. But technically, I'm no longer a part of that community.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to share with the autoimmune community is that there's this framework of the neuroharmony model is basically it's an updated mind body model where you have mind and body, but the thing that communicates between mind and body is biochemistry. And that lab testing is that intersection point that we now have available to us today to really tease apart all the different pathways that connects mind and body. And when you look at even chemistry itself, like it's hard to hold, a neurotransmitter in your hand. And a neurotransmitter is something both physical and non-physical because it's just a couple atoms that are magnetically, electromagnetically held together. So it's kind of in this in between space between physical and non-physical, which is like body and mind. So chemistry is that bridge point. And the biggest thing that I can support with people who are dealing with autoimmunity, and I've had family members that've got autoimmune issues. I've been working with autoimmunity for clinically for years and years and years, and it's that lab testing is one of the real tools we have available today that we never really had before. And when people are looking at autoimmune, there's some very specific types of categories of labs that I'd encourage people to think about. And
Yeah.
then with the labs, make sure you're also working with someone who understands lifestyle. So it's both lab and lifestyle. It's both. And to I encourage people to work with practitioner that has a model for both, a model for lifestyle and a model for labs. A model for lifestyle is looking at what are you doing from the outside in, and then the model for labs is what's happening from the inside out. And combine those two, then you have a real opportunity for positive change.
I love that, and we're gonna dive into that deeply. But I always like to start with story and the reason that you got into this in the first place. And I think that will help build some connection because
Uh,
there's a lot. There's a lot there. And I know that that helps you empathize with a lot of the people that you work with and for them to empathize with you. So, anywhere you want to start, I'd love to hear about your journey.
So, personally, I was very ill as a child, and anyone who deals with autoimmunity, you understand what it's like to be feel very unwell on the inside, but present as potentially normal on the outside. I mean, obviously depends on the autoimmunity, but and the severity and the type. But I lived for since I was 6 years old for over a decade. Was just floundering with all the things you mentioned in the introduction. Turned out I also had Lyme disease when I was a child, and then only found that out recently. And then also uh, I'm also on the spectrum, so I have what's been used to be called Asperger's syndrome, and I know that term has fallen out of favor for a variety of reasons, but I navigated a very fraught, emotionally abusive home life and a physically abusive school life by retreating into watching comedy shows. And as a result, I'm also a stand-up comic. And I have a free 1 hour show on YouTube called Neurospicy Love, Life, and Comedy on the Spectrum. And this is the 60 minutes I wish I had 30 years ago to explain how my brain worked and how to better adapt to the neurotypical world. And one of the reasons that I work a lot with the autoimmune community is because there's unless someone has lived through chronic illness that has been combined with lots of gaslighting, they don't understand what it's really like to live with an autoimmune disease. Now, it's whether I had an autoimmune disease or not, as I'm still actually debating whether you can consider chronic fatigue an autoimmune or not is a big debate at the moment. But honestly, it's not really relevant because in the sense like, did I have an official autoimmune disease or not? Is because the life experience I had is basically identical to the lived experience of pretty much every chronic autoimmune person I know. And it's that apparently okay on the outside, but
Mhm.
quietly deteriorating and suffering on the inside,
Yeah.
being gaslit and from all around you. Like that's the common experience. And for just the grind of year over year over year over year over year. And then on top of that, I've had very, very formative clinical encounters. When I practiced in New Zealand from the beginning of 2010 through the end of 2017. And one of my very first patients, my very first, she came in and had a full on goiter. And I thought goiters were solved back in the 50s. And I couldn't compute what I was seeing because I knew what I was seeing, but my brain was saying, no, this shouldn't be there. And I realized that thyroid issues were a massive problem in New Zealand because of what was called prophylactic periodontistry. Now, if you want
Mm.
to pick apart that Orwellian term, give yourself a minute to really like prophylactic periodontistry, which what it meant is that children in like the 60s and 70s, children were taken out of their classrooms and prophylactically drilled and filled with mercury by dental nurses in the school. They pre-drilled the teeth with mercury to prevent cavities. And so then what happens is that with all that mercury that's released into the system, either directly from that experience or over time, with enough hot acidic liquids or grinding of teeth, the this is just one mechanism, just one.
Mhm.
All the selenium is used up to try to bind up the free mercury so it doesn't cause any damage. But the problem is your thyroid requires selenium to work properly. And so then eventually your thyroid suffers because of all the selenium being uptaken and used to deal with the mercury, and you get thyroid problems. So then fast forward a bit, and then I had another patient of mine. This is 2000. That's the preamble. That's a prodroma to this story. 2014, a patient came in also with a goiter and had, I think, of the 13 or so signs I have on one of my chart. I think it's like 12 or 13 signs. She ticked every single one except I think one of them for hypothyroid. And she sat in front of me with a goiter. And this, you can see it. You can see it. She told me that her specialist, her endocrinologist, the specialist said that her TSH was fine. Therefore, she didn't have Hashimoto's. Then she was just depressed and needs to go on antidepressant and to get out of her office. That is very few times I see red. And I was absolutely livid, not with her. I was at the practitioner, and through gritted teeth, I said, I swear to you, I will find you a better thyroid test. What happened to
Mhm.
you was wrong. I'm very sorry and embarrassed on behalf of the entire healthcare profession. What happened was wrong. And I will find you a better test beyond just TSH. And I almost chipped a tooth. I was clenched. I was so furious. And I found her the test. She was a little shocked by my emotional response because I hate medical. My grandfather died from medical misadventure.
Mm.
He was a famous medical doctor.
Mhm.
He was the founding director of the Fels Cancer Research Center at Temple University in 1937. He published over 300 scientific articles, died on the operating table from a misdiagnosis, and he just died on the operating table. So to me, medical misadventure is to take very seriously. So I found the right thyroid test. And the thyroid test included TSH, free T3, free T4, reverse T3, anti-TPO, or what's called thyroperoxidase antibodies, anti-TG, anti-thyroglobulin, and also had anti-TSH receptor, which you don't really see that much. The point being is that like there was 6, 7 markers, not one. And sure enough, she had massive antibodies that the stupid endocrinologist, and I literally mean that, stupid endocrinologist, I don't care how many doctorates this guy has, didn't bother to test for the antibodies, and he just leaned on TSH like much of archaic, out of date understandings of labs are, particularly if you're in I don't want to careen into politics, but there are downsides to socialized medicine. New Zealand is a socialized medicine society.
Yeah.
And the problem with socialized medicine is that when they determine what the markers they allow, that is it.
Yeah.
And and you have to fight and fight and fight and fight to even get free T4. You
Well,
know?
it sounds like your own personal experience of maybe being bullied at school and having, some difficulties, let's call it trauma
Mhm.
at home,
Yeah.
plus this observation that people are still hearing today that nothing is wrong with them, that all they need to do is go on an antidepressant and they'll be fine.
That's what my
And
parents told me.
right, and it seems to me that your passion
A
for what you
actually
do is fueled by this.
actually, Palmer, just to I think you actually clocked in something from I hadn't
Okay.
considered before. I think and thank you for this. I think one of the reasons I was so enraged
Mhm.
is I didn't realize it until just now that what happened to that patient was exactly what my parents did to me.
Ah.
And thank you for that. I had actually not connected those dots before. So,
Yeah.
because I knew the level of rage I felt was
Yeah.
proportionate. I mean, there's out
Yeah.
to be had, and I
Right.
thought it was because of what happened to my grandfather, but I think
Yeah.
it's an additional layer of what my parents did the exact same thing to me. Just
Yeah.
stop complaining and go on antidepressant.
So you use the word gaslight, and I think it would be helpful for people. Not everybody knows what the term means.
Okay, sure. Gaslighting means you see a thing that's real, but people tell you it's not real,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
you're the one that's crazy. So,
Yeah, and it's not, it makes you feel like you might be crazy because enough people start to do that and you feel like, "Oh my god, there must be something wrong with me." And
correct.
when doctors do this, because they've got the white coat, they've got the degree, you know, it's really a trust issue. I mean, it becomes a really a schism, right?
Hmm. Yeah, it's called it's a term called moral injury,
Yeah.
which means the betrayal of what's right in a high stakes situation by someone in authority.
Oh,
Ironically, my father was the one who coined that term and got his MacArthur for it. The irony is pretty layered, and when someone's trust is harmed by someone in authority in a high stakes situation, trust does not exist in a vacuum. What is replaced by trust, and I'm directly quoting my father's work, is the anticipation, expectation of harm, humiliation, and exploitation. And that's a functional definition of paranoia. And so when people have their trust violated by someone in authority in a high stakes situation, it's equivalent of being physically injured, but it's a moral injury, hence the term moral injury. And you now see this term moral injury being used in the zeitgeist, whether it's in like Miami CSI or on podcasts or whatnot. And of course, the irony is that in the name of his career of defining and disseminating the term moral injury, he caused moral injury in his son.
goodness,
So
Sam.
now it's very weird to support my father's work, but not appreciate my father's parenting,
Yeah.
a lack
Yeah.
thereof, rather. Uh,
That is some amazing. I mean, you could see where the richness of we do what we do often because of where we've been. You know, our history shape who we are, and we can use that and kind of get that righteous indignation and channel it into helping other people. And I am a supporter of the little guy, and my dad was verbally abusive of my mom, and I was my mom's defender, and I don't like it when people are bullied or attacked. Some people shirk from that, might hide, and I was age 3, putting my fists up to my dad, "You call my mom names, and I'll sock your lights out." So we all have a different response to how we're going to deal with something like that, and I love how you are stepping up and helping people to see, "No, you're not crazy. There are real things going on here," and we'll talk about the lab stuff that you get into to prove it, but I would love to know, how did you go from those experiences that you had to even getting into functional medicine and then creating this
sure. Well,
neuroharmony
actually,
model?
it actually will tie together quite nicely
Yeah.
in the narrative. But before we do that, just quick, my agility with perplexity came through. The term gaslighting originated from the title of the 1938 British stage play called Gaslight by Patrick Hamilton, and it was adapted in 1940 to a British film, and then more famously a 44 American film, both titled Gaslight. Just a husband manipulates his wife into doubting her own sanity by subtly altering elements of their environment, most notably dimming the gas lights in their home, and then insisting that she's imagining the changes when she notices them. This psychological manipulation causes her to question her own perceptions and reality. That's just the first of 3 paragraphs. I'll read you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I want people to really to appreciate this. If this is how you ever feel like you are being made to feel like you're crazy because your doctor tells you that there's nothing wrong with these lab tests, you just need an antidepressant or any number of things that I've heard. I personally heard in my own life, you need to be on medication. There's nothing else you can do. There's no
mm,
such thing as reversing autoimmune disease. I mean, it's just nonsense, but it's still happening today.
totally. So the going back to your question, so I was supposed to be the third generation medical doctor. So I had my grandfather, and then he died on the operating table in '65 when he was 63 years old. I was born 17 years later, so I never met my grandfather on my father's side. My both my mother and my father are medical doctors, and I was supposed to be the third generation. And I knew at age 6 I was going to be a doctor. I didn't know why. I just knew I was. But it was high school where I pivoted quite hard into natural medicine because Western medicine was quite literally going to kill me. With the gaslighting and just medicating me to submission and just feeling totally dead inside on SSRIs and knowing that something was wrong and no one believing me. And
Mm.
the answer was just shut up and take the pill. And then I met my first mentor who used something called Brain Gym, which is a derivative of Touch for Health, which was a derivative of applied kinesiology, which leveraged basically Paul Dennison's work on different brain, movement and brain development. And my first mentor, Eliza Bergeson, she helped me understand viscerally that my thoughts are not me, that I'm not a victim of my own thinking, and that I can alter my perceptions of the world through the body. That I do have agency over my mind and my body, and she was able to turn my whole life around. And I decided to devote my life to natural medicine as opposed to pharmaceutical medicine. And that's, I mean, at this age from 6 to 18, I met her when I was 16. So I had a good year and a half of working with her before I went off to college. And that's where my life really turned around. And I had a very different life in college. I didn't party. I didn't drink. I didn't do any drugs. I got really heavy into meditation and breathing techniques, which is what helped me get off my antidepressants and my insomnia medication, and just was focused on natural medicine. And then and got very heavy into Weston A. Price nutrition, very, very heavy into it. Eliza introduced me to Sally Fallon's book, Nourishing Traditions, and ran an organic kitchen co-op according to Weston A. Price's principles while in college.
Mm.
And then took a year and a half off to travel between college and graduate school, then went to chiropractic school in Dallas, Texas. And then while I was in school, I got very, very heavy into neurology and nutrition while in school. And then started learning about functional testing in my neurology classes, actually. And then after I graduated and got my neurodiplomate, I then also traveled around the United States for about a year teaching other chiropractors how to pass their national registration exams. So I taught anatomy, biochemistry, physiology, microbiology, pathology, X-ray analysis to other chiropractors, and then went over to New Zealand to for hands-on practice. And that's where I got my acupuncture degree and got introduced into actually using the functional labs in my day-to-day practice, and then really got heavy into functional medicine and started studying with Dr. Kalish, and like really, and also the Institute for Functional Medicine. Uh, I studied with them a couple years into working with Dr. Kalish.
Got it. And that's where we met at
Yes.
one of those conferences, which kind of brings us to
I think I
present.
was presenting. I think I was actually presenting there on addiction. I think I had a poster session on addiction there.
Yeah, that may be. Now, I wanna segue into the neuroharmony method because so many people with autoimmunity are dealing with so many complexities, but one of the biggest areas that I think we've both experienced is trauma.
Mhm.
And this particular approach that you have is trauma informed and a nervous system first approach. And I think that it would be really beneficial for people to understand what it is and, how you go about offering it.
Sure. So the basic premise is you got outside in lifestyle analysis with inside out lab analysis combined together, and then there's sub frameworks underneath that. But the core concept is neuroharmony is, can we wed together what is invisible from the outside, all the different biochemistry and neurochemistry that's happening internally, with a harmonic lifestyle that can be acted out in the physical world, and then can we kind of harmonize those two together? And the way to do both of them is you have labs to analyze the internal, and you have a very detailed model for lifestyle analysis to analyze the external. So with the external, there's 10 components that I've identified with lifestyle, and these 10 they're not randomly put together. There were what I saw in clinical practice in New Zealand when I worked with the clients that I saw were the throwaway clients. They're called the rubbish bin clients in New Zealand medicine that were kind of removed from they're too hard. And then the too hard basket. So these were typically women, 35 to 60 ish, that had a combination of chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, an autoimmune disease or two, digestive problems, hormone imbalance, weight issues, and fatigue, like just all the things all wrapped up into one person.
Hmm.
And what I found was that through detailed lifestyle analysis, I found that there were 10 pillars of health. The people who suffered with chronic health issues had a minimum 7 out of 10 crumbling. Didn't actually matter which seven. It was a minimum 7 out of 10. There was one exception. She had six, but one of those pillars uh is stressors and trauma. And she had horrific trauma, like child in danger, like the
Hmm.
worst type of trauma a mother could have,
Hmm.
and that would crack anyone over the edge.
Right.
So aside from that, it was 7 out of 10 pillars, and so the 10 pillars in brief, they all begin with a B because I like alliteration. Brain and hormones, bowel and digestion, body, the physical body, which means structure, which means posture, which means uh, dealing with head injuries, bad dental work, chronic pain. And I put the labs for the third pillar body. I put genetics in here because the physical twins have identical bodies because they have the same genetics. Obviously, gut testing would be in the bowel phenomenon. Hormone testing would be in the brain and hormone section. Fourth pillar is burst exercise and movement. So this is people how often, how much variety, how much recovery, and how much intensity do they have in their movement practices? Now, exercise is a dirty word to a lot of people, particularly if you're tired and in a lot of pain. So I talk about movement as opposed to exercise, and there are safe ways to do high intensity interval training, even if one is fragile and in pain. And because people mistake I mean, I have entire YouTube videos on this and interviews just on exercise, but high intensity doesn't mean you do, Tabatas for a minute and pass out. High intensity is a physiological phenomenon, not a CrossFit phenomenon, meaning that you can do, I have, like, for example, I have an osteoporotic 70-year-old grandmother. Her high intensity workout is standing wall push-ups slowly until she gets a deep muscle burn in her biceps and triceps. That's the as long as she gets to that deep muscle burn in a minute or less, that's the high intensity for her. As
Love it.
opposed, and this so it safe high intensity interval training, not
Yeah.
HIIT, but SHIIT. I'm not going to say it out loud. Um, but safe high intensity interval training is a principle, not an exercise that can be applied across whatever age, whatever condition.
Absolutely.
And that's the difference between just, oh, you got to exercise more versus, like, are we following logic, evolutionary biology, physiology? Like is this a principle? Like this
And
is one of the
meeting people where they are. I mean,
exactly,
everybody comes from a different perspective, and some people are bedbound, some people are chair-bound. It's like, let's meet you where you are and what are you able to do, and
exactly,
movement is it's just lotion. I mean, it is really so important,
totally.
so beautiful.
So that's the fourth pillar is burst exercise and movement. Fifth one is biotoxins, and that, I mean, we can spend, 20 hours just talking about that, whether it's chemicals in the food, in the air, in the water, in the upholstery, in the carpet, in metals. I would put endotoxins.
Mold.
Mold is in the ninth category of bugs and infections and mold. Mold is weird. Mold is both a toxin and an infection. It's both. It's kind of the worst of both worlds. uh, but like kind of the non-living excretia of of infections you could throw in the biotoxin bucket.
Mm.
Then the sixth pillar is bionutrients, which is the most controversial pillar because everyone and their mother has a different opinion depending on the type of day of what diet you should have. I personally think that you can use genetics to determine someone's optimal diet these days. And there is a unique genetics test out there that you can determine if you're best suited for keto, paleo, Mediterranean, or high carb, which is huge significance
Yeah.
for the whole rest of your life. And, in the biotoxins, just back into pillar five, like you can do mitochondria analysis, liver pathway analysis, amino acid analysis, mold in pillar nine also, but environmental toxins, heavy metals, all that testing is in there. Bionutrients, you can test for what nutrients you need. Genetically, you can test for, do you need genetically higher levels of anti-inflammatory things or this type of thing or whatever it is. And then you've got the metabolic testing, whether it's a mitochondria panel to see where you're at with your amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, and so on. Then you've got pillar seven, which is breakfast and routines. So the morning and evening routines are critical because I saw that the sickest group of professionals I've ever worked with as a group of professionals were night shift nurses.
Mm. Mm.
Just just categorically the most unwell group of professionals I've ever worked with in my life. And the one of the biggest variables was the human Tetris that the hospital administrators would put these nurses through. And their schedules would be so messed up and it would affect their entire diurnal rhythms,
Yeah.
complicate everything that almost every other profession does not have to deal with the exception
Yeah.
like flight personnel and a couple other professions. But hospital nursing is just uniquely destructive. Uh,
Yeah.
and so I made that a separate pillar, which was breakfast and routines.
Mm-hmm.
The eighth pillar is bothers, stressors, and traumas. Bothers was the only B word for stress and trauma. Come
I
up.
like it.
It's
It could be a big
if,
bother.
if people are like bothers, I was like, hey, you came up with a 10-letter alliterative framework, all right?
Right,
Just
right, right.
like, you try this.
I have done that myself.
Um, and then the ninth pillar is bugs, hidden infections, and mold. Whether it's
Mm.
whether it's mold, whether it's hidden gut infections, and you can arguably put the gut infections in the bowel. But again, it's like making a framework. There's going to be some crossover. And then the 10th pillar is bedtime or sleep,
Mm.
depth, duration, quality, consistency of sleep. So those are the 10 pillars. Now, 7 out of 10 crumbling, I saw, which created the chronic disease. On top of that, when I ran the genetics analysis, I saw, again, with only one exception, someone with a chronic disease had double variants in their VDR genes.
Mm.
The double variance in the VDRs was the most predictive genetic sign that predicts someone's vulnerability to chronic illness.
So tell people what VDR stands for.
Vitamin D receptors.
Yes, I
So,
am among those people.
me too. I've got the homozygous variants, which is a Scrabble way of saying the really, really bad versions. So there's making there's about six major genes between you and the sun to synthesize vitamin D to get vitamin D into your blood. Now, I'm not talking about those. I honestly couldn't really care less about those because you can get vitamin D from sunlight, food, and supplements. Some people more readily from sun than others. Whatever. That's getting vitamin D into the blood. That's not where vitamin D is important. Vitamin D is important when it gets from the blood into the cells. That's where it's important. And you need these docking sites or to bring the vitamin D into the cell. Now, the thing, why is this so important? Well, vitamin D controls somewhere between 3 to 5% of your entire genetic expression, and most of it relating to infection and inflammation, not bone density. So,
Wow.
so vitamin D is the top 10 most important molecules in the body next to like water. So what I saw is that when people aren't able to use vitamin D, they can't control inflammation and infection and in their immune system that well, so they're much more vulnerable to chronic illnesses like autoimmunity. Now, to give people another metaphor, your bloodstream has all the nutrition that's distributing to the and it's also the way to get rid of garbage out of the cells. So imagine your bloodstream is a giant rotating sushi tray, and your cells have these, very specialized chopsticks to grab the vitamin D that's floating by. But certain
Mm.
people genetically don't have enough of the chopsticks to grab the vitamin D that's whizzing by. And so that, you, the sushi patron, you're starving for this particular thing and it's hard to get. So, so I found that the genetically people were very vulnerable if they had variants in their vitamin D receptors. By the way, I cross-checked this with the genetics company and asked the science officer who founded it to check with his other practitioners who ran a lot of tests, and also to check the archives to see if there was a pattern on that he could see on his end. And he came back to me a couple of months later, like, absolutely, absolutely, vitamin D receptors, there's a pattern. So when looking at the 10 pillars, the way the neuroharmony method does is that we look at all the 10 pillars and then prioritize them. What is the most important thing first, next, and last? Like sleep is pillar 10 for teaching purposes, but practically most people, it's their first, second, or third priority. So there's the teaching model, but then like everyone has a different priority of the 10 pillars. And then we figure out, of these 10 pillars, what do we work on first, next, and last so that you can get and feel better as quickly as possible from a lifestyle standpoint? And then you combine it with lab testing, because the 10 pillars can also inform sometimes you just know what labs to do just when you chat with someone. Other times you need the 10 pillars to inform what is the hidden lab tests that are needed. So we have a structure for lifestyle, and the structure for labs is you've got 5 major classes of labs.
Sam, before you go into this, can I
Yeah,
pause you?
sure.
'Cause I wanna go back to the VDR,
Uh-huh.
because I have this and my, research into this and trying to figure out, well, what do I do? Because I just take extra vitamin D and K2. Um, what do you recommend to people who have these SNPs in
Sure.
their vitamin D
So,
receptors?
for people who don't know, SNPs means single nucleotide polymorphism, which is basically you've got a different version, and that's ideal. So with VDR, there's there's taking more vitamin D, so there's more vitamin D on the sushi tray for these slow chopsticks to grab, so it's
Yep.
easy more to grab. But the thing you want to do is to upregulate the amount of vitamin D that's um, vitamin D receptors. You want to increase the number of chopsticks. You want to increase the number of receptors, the number of docking sites. So
Yeah.
the number one way to withdraw the docking sites, to destroy the chopsticks, is smoking and being exposed to smoking and pollution. So when you see people, struggling with infections a lot, first thing I look at is like what's their smoking status, and is it first, second, or third hand smoke or pollution that they're exposed to, because that will withdraw the vitamin D receptors.
Interesting.
The next thing is sulforaphane is one of the nutrients that precious few things that actually upregulates vitamin D receptors. Now, the thing about sulforaphane, and I'll give a bit of a background on it. Sulforaphane is it's a very small molecule that is usually found in broccoli sprouts, not broccoli necessarily, but broccoli sprouts. It's not even sulforaphane. You find an enzyme and substrate called um, glucoraphanin and moracinase are the two things. Now, I know I'm getting to like lots of jargon and Scrabble word stuff here, but just hang with me. The entire point of sulforaphane is that it's broccoli's natural pesticide.
Mm,
And when like Alice, is it allicin or alicillin in garlic? It's one of the
I know
2.
what you
I
mean.
can't remember.
The green thing in the middle.
Yeah, it's a chemical. So when an insect bites garlic,
Mhm.
and it crushes the cell wall, and things combine, things that were separate are now combined and now are toxic and kills the thing that bit it.
Yeah.
That's because plants can't move.
Mhm.
They have this thing where you bite me, you die. It's equivalent to like people ask, like, where did the psychedelic components of mushrooms come from? What's the evolutionary basis of that? Well, if you're a deer, if if you're a mushroom and you can't move, and a deer herd comes by, and the deer bites the mushroom and dies instantly, well, that doesn't necessarily inform the herd to not go and touch these things with red dots. But if you bite the mushroom and then the deer starts hallucinating, and then it's like, whoa, I'm not going to eat that again, and like it starts acting weird, then it's going to inform the herd in some more substantial long-term way than just mere poison. And so with sulforaphane, sorry, there's no hallucinogenic properties to broccoli. Apologies. I didn't mean to get your hopes up. But with sulforaphane, it's the same concept where when you break the cell wall, you have glucoraphanin and myrasinase combined together. It's enzyme substrate, and now pops out sulforaphane, which is not very stable. It's short-lived, but it's basically an insecticide. Now, what happens is that if you get and not all broccoli strains have the right ratio of myracin. Commercial broccoli strains have myrasinase to glucoraphanin ratios. So that's why this is one of the cases where supplements are really valuable, because they can put in the correct, I think it's 4-to-1, the ratio of the substrate to the enzyme, that they combine in your system to form sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is a mild pro-oxidant. It's not an antioxidant. It's a pro-oxidant, which is important because you don't want to really combine sulforaphane with antioxidants like vitamin A, C, E, selenium, and so on, because it'll muzzle the effect. And what happens if it's a mild pro-oxidant, it's very similar to the hormetic effect of exercise, where you have an irritant that has a net positive benefit. So this mild pro-oxidant sulforaphane will alert the cells like, hey, there's potentially a lot of inflammation coming our way. Quick, mobilize the vitamin D receptors,
Mm,
mobilize the anti-inflammatory genes, mobilize the liver detox genes, because we got to prepare. So this
cool.
minor pro-oxidant has a disproportionate net antioxidant and pro vitamin D effect. That's the mechanism of action.
I see. It's making
And
more chopsticks.
it's making more chopsticks in anticipation that there's a major inflammatory or inflammation
Yeah.
threat on
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So just make sure you don't take your sulforaphane when you take your vitamin A,
in
C,
the
E.
opposites. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Some people are very extreme about it. So you have to be 24 hours separate. And I'm like, dude, no, that's not practical.
Okay.
I just don't take them. I just take them like in the morning away from other antioxidants, and I'm
Got
done.
it.
I just don't. I'm not
So
gonna let the perfect be the enemy of the good here.
I get it. We have 5 minutes left, Sam, and I know you've got
Okay.
a ton to say, and I want to make sure that we're covering the most important things to you. And I know that you work with people one on one. So, instead of going through all the lab tests, I think it would be maybe most helpful for people to understand your perspective on why genetic testing is so valuable. It's something that I've kind of not poo-pooed because I know my genes are not my destiny, but knowing that I have a VDR, knowing that I have MTHFR and a whole host of other acronyms that, mean nothing unless you have somebody very smart who can help you translate, well, what does this actually mean and what do you do about it? And I actually have found that there's so many different genetic tests, and I know that you like this one, Fit Genes. There's also some others that do food genetics where you can understand, are you carb tolerant or intolerant? And I happen to be one of those like you. I'm not a carb tolerant. In fact, I look at carbs and start gaining weight. So maybe you can talk a little bit about why genetic testing is so important and which one you recommend for people.
Sure. So genetics is foundational. It's foundational, but it's not deterministic. But it's no different than a mitochondria test or a thyroid is foundational test, but it's also not deterministic. The body has rules. The body has rules and it has boundaries, and your genetics defined the size of your boundaries. That's the best way to think about it. Some of us have smaller boundaries than others, and a smaller playing field. And some of us have larger playing fields, and some of us have larger playing fields in certain areas and smaller in others. And so think of genetics not as an on-off switch, but think of it as a dial. And that your genetics determine how wide or how narrow your dial is, and also what section of the dial you're biased towards. And this is a much more accurate and more empowering way to think about genetics, that there's hard limits and to what people's capacities are, and lifestyle determines where you're playing within that field. And it's like the genes are the ref and your lifestyle is how you play the game.
Yeah.
And
Beautifully said.
that's the way to reconcile genetics. And so I personally would like to know the rules of the game.
Yeah.
I would like to know that, because otherwise I'm going to get into trouble if I don't know the rules of the game, and I don't, and I violate the rules of the body. So that's how I accurately place genetics in context with everything else. There are people that have certain gene, like for example, the genes that control for celiac. People can have gluten, not have this gene that makes celiac, and not get celiac, and eat gluten, still have problems from gluten, just not celiac.
Right. That's me. Non-celiac gluten sensitivity.
Right. And then there's people who have the genes for celiac and they eat gluten and they get celiac. So it's
That's
like
right.
their boundaries around their playing field for gluten is not great. So the reason why I like genetics is because, one, it's the only test I know of that you do once and you got the data for life. So it's the highest value investment of any health test out there. All the other tests are transient. 3 months, 6 months, 1 year viability in terms of
Right.
you'll make decisions from the data. Those tests are great. I run those all the time. Mitochondria, hormone, gut testing. I love them, run them all the time, teach on them. They're great. Genetics, you do once, you're done. And so the value is not even another test is even close second. And um the the other benefit of genetics is that you have your whole life to implement everything, and it's pretty non-negotiable, which is particularly great for certain personalities that like say you do like a stress test and they're like, "Oh, I was just stressed that day." Rah, rah. Like the test didn't mean anything. It was like, "Oh, I ate an extra thing and it affected the result." Up. You give someone a genetics test, like this happened multiple times in New Zealand, where alcoholism is the national sport, second only to rugby. And I've helped several people get off alcohol by just merely handing them their genetics tests around their liver detox. And a couple of them tried to argue, and I just kind of said, "No, go on, argue with your genetics. Let's see how that goes.
Argue with the
I,
data.
I can use some entertainment. Go on, try. Go on. I'll sit here. That's fine." And like they finally like snapped out of it, and they're like, "Okay, I have to stop drinking." I'm like, "In your case, yes.
Yeah.
In your case, yes. You
Yeah.
must. This is not negotiable." So there's a finality to it that can be, on the one hand, viewed as depressing, but the other hand is quite clarifying. That
Yeah.
there is a certain freedom in the constraint. And in terms of the diet, not all genetics tests are created equal. There's a lot of variant testing that can check for, are you histamine intolerant? What's your relationship to alcohol metabolism, to gluten, to lactose,
Coffee.
coffee, to food allergens in general. But the specific carb tolerance test, that is not available in the States. That the one I'm talking about is not about variation of the AME1 gene. I'm talking about duplicates of the
Mm.
AME1 gene. So it's the number of duplicates of the gene that generates the enzyme amylase in the saliva that matters way more than the variation of the gene. So if my intestinal system is a fort and the Visigoths charging the gates are carbs, the canon is the AME1 gene. Now the version of the canon is if it's a red, yellow, or green dot. But the
Mm.
difference in this case between a yellow, and green dot is trivial. Like, is it 100 bullets versus 95 versus 90? It's not that much different. But the number of cannons matters. I'd rather have 9 red cannons than 1 green cannon. If we followed these made up numbers of 90, times 10 versus 1 times 100. It's the duplicates that matter. And that's a completely different swab. It's a completely different genetic analysis. And you can't get that from 23andMe or Ancestry, or you can't get anything from 23andMe at the moment, but
Right,
whatever.
right, right.
That's a different genetics analysis. And that's the one that's through FitGenes. Now, full disclosure, I am the Western distributor for FitGenes because I've been working with the company for coming up 10 years now.
Yeah.
And they needed a talented and motivated instructor in the States, and I'm it. So I don't even know where to recommend to get this test anywhere else in the States, because you can't, as far as I know. And we've looked because we wanted to try to find a lab In the States, we'd have to ship the things back to Australia. But we have to. So here we are. The other variant testing for you looking for your relationship to inflammation, how your genes are for inflammation and vitamin D receptors and free radical damage in the mitochondria and food allergens, food triggers, etc. There's many companies that do that, but you have to ask, does the company prioritize the genes or not? And that's the biggest problem with these other gene companies is they don't prioritize. They just, here's all your genes. They all seem of equal importance. And here's
Right.
100 different health tips. So it's where it's not our problem. You're going to feel overwhelmed, confused, and ultimately defeated because you have to do all of these changes by tomorrow because clearly your genes say you're going to die on Tuesday past the Twinkies. It's not the other gene tests are so overwhelming.
Right.
Don't
Right.
prioritize. And that's the difference between fit genes. There's a carb test and then there's this prioritization that
Got
I
it.
find anywhere else.
If someone's interested in working with you and how do they go about finding you and what's your preferred?
Just my website is just drsamshay.com, drsamshay.com. And there's a link there for a free 15-minute discovery call to see what your needs are and how these different models can support you. I also have for a genetics program, there's a DIY version of this whole genetics program, and there's also a group coaching element as well. If people want to have a 6-month on-ramp of like actual live coaching twice a month
Yeah.
to help support these kind of for life lifestyle habits from the genetics, that's also available. So the genetics is really able to be scaled in a way to help everyone and empower everybody.
I'm so glad that you're doing this because it is such a complicated arena. I didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole because it's just so complicated. And to have somebody like you who has such a passion for it, who's done this research, to be able to make heads or tails of it for people, I think is just truly a game changer, Sam. And you couple that with other functional tests and your personal experience and your passion for this. And I think it's beautiful what you've put together for people.
Thank you, Palmer, and I really appreciate. We've known each other now for coming up 10 years, which is kind of let's think about it, and it's wonderful to see how our paths keep intersecting. And I appreciate you being a voice for those with autoimmunity, and the suffering and the gaslit,
Yeah.
and we really need people like you to continue to provide super valuable information and help provide a hope and inspiration and resources for everyone.
I love it, and I love staying connected with you. I love that you're still doing comedy. I want people to go to your YouTube channel. I'll put all this in the show notes so that they can check out your comedy, more information on your 10-point wellness program, your genetics. You offer so many beautiful ops for people, and I think that is just a testament to you and your passion for what you're doing, Sam. So thank you so much for being on. I look forward to continuing the conversation again soon.
Thank you.
And till the next time, be well, my friend.
You too.
And that's a wrap. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with your friends and family, and if you feel inspired, please leave a quick review so other people can find it too. Now, if you want to beat autoimmune and thrive, make sure you sign up for my free video training at freeautoimmunetraining.com. That's freeautoimmunetraining.com and watch the first video right away. Take good care. Bye for now.